Hello and welcome to another episode of the BSN podcast. Today is Wednesday, August 3rd. Hope everybody's having a day so far and had a good rest of their day yesterday. It is in fact Wednesday, August 3rd. The deadline is officially behind us. Yankees and Mets both make moves and finalize their rosters for their respective postseason runs. So a lot of action to unpack today, a lot to get to. Yankees Mets were both on last night. Two tough losses. Yankees lose 8-6 to the Mariners. Came back and then lose the lead. Come back, lose the lead. That was kind of the story of the New York Yankees last night. Just could not get anything going. They would come back and then their pitching loses it for them. Come back and they lose it. So a tough night. One of those nights where it's back and forth and you're just not able to deliver that one big punch to take a lead, to take that big lead, to turn things around and come back in the game. You had bases loaded in the bottom of the ninth with 2 outs. Gleyber comes up to pinch hit for Tim LeCastro, who came in to pinch run. It is what it is. I mean, I would take Gleyber up there over Tim LeCastro any day. He was sitting fastballs off. He was waiting fastball off speed. Slider came in, was way ahead of it, no chance on it. So it is what it is. It was clear that Munoz was pitching around Judge and Rizzo, because once Gleyber stepped up there, it was like, oh, I'm going to start throwing strikes now. So it was clear that he was pitching around, which is a risk because you load the bases. So if you walk a guy, the tying run's on second, so it doesn't really mean much, but, it's not like the tying run's on third, and if you walk him, that's a tie game, but, still, you walk a guy with the bases, not unintentionally, but intentionally at the same time, walking two guys with the bases loaded, or walking two guys to get the bases loaded, is definitely a risky play by Scott Servais and the Mariners, but they did it, and the Yankees take the loss. So Yankees lose yesterday. Mets do as well. Mets were playing up against a minor league team with all the Soto stuff, but they lose. Nationals win. That's that's baseball. As John Sterling will say, that's baseball, Susan. So a 5-1 victory there. So today, Yankees Mets will both wrap up their 3-game sets. Yankees against the Mariners, looking for the series win. The rubber game there, and also in Washington D.C., the Mets against the Nationals. That will also be the rubber game of a 3-game set. So both the Yankees and Mets will look for series wins today before the Yankees have an off day. Mets will be in action tomorrow against the Braves. So a lot going on over these next couple days with baseball. And with all that being said, let's get into the topics for today's podcast. So we're going to get to the Yankees and Mets trade deadline recap. I'm going to recap it all, give you my thoughts, kind of my finishing thoughts on all the moves that went down. Yesterday, the Yankees officially trade Joey Gallo to the Dodgers. They also make one other trade, which I think caught a lot of people by surprise, just because of the fact that he just pitched 2 days ago. He's a part of the 5-man rotation, and you're bringing in a guy, an outfielder, when you already brought in another outfielder. But I don't hate the trade if I'm a New York Yankee, as a New York Yankee fan. So we'll get into all that. Mets make minor moves. I don't think a lot of people love it, but we'll get into both those, and we'll also recap the general, just the overall baseball recap of all the MLB, all the moves that went down. I talked about some of them yesterday. There was more talked about some of them yesterday. There was more that took place later on yesterday. Soto getting traded, Josh Bell and Soto going to the Padres. Then Eric Hosmer saying, I don't want to go there, so he's not on the Red Sox. The Red Sox deadline got weirder. So a lot went on yesterday. Every single MLB team, every team made a trade other than the Colorado Rockies. And the Rockies, I'm sure, too, were fielding calls on guys like Daniel Bard. I'm sure C.J. Cron's name popped up a little bit in a couple of those conversations. So I'm sure they were involved. They just decided not to pull the trigger. So a lot went on yesterday. We'll get to all of it later on. Anyway, and then we'll finish off with the New York Sports Update. Yankees, Mariners, Mets, Nationals. All right, so with all that being said, this is the BSN podcast, and let's get right into it. So yesterday was the trade deadline, as you all know, 6 p.m. Eastern deadline. Mets and Yankees. Yankees, like I said, did most of their heavy lifting on Monday and the days prior, bringing in Benintendi, especially Monday, bringing in Efros, Trevino, and Montez. And by the way, Trevino and Efros both got in the game. Both look good. Both did what they needed to do, so that's a good start for them in pinstripes. We'll get to see what Montez is a couple days. I don't know when he's exactly supposed to start. I'm sure it should be relatively soon because he was actually originally supposed to start on Tuesday for the A's. I believe they're playing the Angels. But obviously with the trade, he should be starting soon. So Yankees, Mets yesterday both made a couple moves. Yankees made the obvious one, getting rid of Joey Gallo. And they also made a shocking move, getting rid of Jordan Montgomery. And they traded him to the St. Louis Cardinals for Harrison Bader, outfielder. Phenomenal defensive outfielder, Gold Glover. One of the best defensive outfielders in all of baseball. And it was kind of come by a shock. It was later on in the day. It was about 5:40, 5:50-ish when the deal came down. And, you always sometimes get those little deals that happen maybe 10, 15 minutes after the official deadline. If they're still working on something, sometimes you see that. Yankees, Mets did not make any of those moves. But, the Yankees made that move very, very early, or very late, rather, and very close to the deadline. And it was almost like one of those last-second things where maybe the Cardinals were shopping around Bader, couldn't find a better deal, called up the Yankees and said, look, we'll take Monty from you, we'll give you Bader, call it a day. And it kind of come by a shock. And I think it shocked the Yankees a little bit. I think it shocked the overall fan base. I think it shocked the locker room just because of the fact that Monty was a five-man rotation. It was in the five-man rotation. He was a guy that came up in the farm system. He's homegrown. He has a lot of ties with a lot of former players. Him and CeCe have worked together over the past couple years in the offseason. Both two guys lefties. He grown to really, CeCe was kind of a mentor for him. He got close with Jameson Taillon. So it was a little bit weird taking a guy that was very close within the locker room, very, just a big name within the organization, homegrown, to get moved on. But at the end of the day, when you really look at the move and you really look at what the Yankees are trying to do, I understand it. And at first you look at it and you say, all right, why are we doing this? And at the end of the day, Jack Curry said it. He said prior to the game yesterday, he said the Yankees at the end of the day felt that Monty was not going to be one of the starters during the postseason. And they feel Bader is going to make a impact for this team in the postseason, and hopefully, if we get there, World Series, which is obviously the ultimate goal. And that's where I think I understand it a little bit more, is if Monty wasn't going to start in the postseason, he was going to get thrown into the bullpen. Might as well get something for him now and bring in a piece that could really help you, a guy like a Bader, and I'll talk about what his impact can be here in a second, but bring in a guy who can make an impact rather than the guy who's going to kind of get thrown into the bullpen with a bunch of different arms and maybe be seen once for maybe an inning. And I think that's what the Yankees' thought process was. And I got to admit, I was a little bummed losing Montgomery because I've really liked Montgomery. I've always thought he was just a solid pitcher that was just a guy that goes out there, does what he needs to do, is going to give you a good outing. He's not going to throw you anything special, but he's going to do what he needs to do, and he's going to try to help the team win. And, he's been struggling a little bit recently, but you're going to have those ups and downs. I mean, I would take, right now, over the struggles, I would take Monty over Taillon. Maybe the Yankees try to throw Taillon in the deal. Who knows? But that definitely came by a little bit of a shock. But I think it's something that the Yankees believe, look, it's going to benefit them. And Harrison Bader brings a lot to the table. He brings very good defense. His hitting's not great, but when you line up his stats against Aaron Hicks this year, I know he's played 20 less games, and he's been on the IL recently with some, I think, plantar fasciitis, a foot injury, but he should be back soon. He's a guy that, when you line up his numbers against Aaron Hicks, is really not that far off. There's a couple things that he actually is better than Hicks when it comes to his hitting. And I think it's, when a lot of people look at Bader, they're like, oh, very good defensively, not good offensively. But when you look at him against Hicks, it's almost like it's an upgrade defensively and offensively in a way over Aaron Hicks. And you really wonder if the Yankees are taking the path, because Hicks right now is in the middle of a really tough slump. Did not hit well last night. And a guy who, when runners are in scoring position, does not hit. Again last night. Was a runner on first and third, I think it was, or whatever. He grounded into a double play. A guy who just does not hit with runners in scoring position. And when postseason comes around, you need guys that are going to hit in the post. You need guys that are going to hit with runners in scoring position. Hicks does not do that. Now, I'm not saying Bader is going to be that guy, but Bader's probably not going to play every day. They're bringing him in to be a guy that's going to, take Judge off his feet a little bit, put him out there in the outfield, knowing that you trust him. He's a Gold Glover. He's one of the best center fielders in all the game. He's been phenomenal. And I do remember a Harrison Bader moment where when Miles Mikolas had his no-hitter earlier this year, and it was against the Pirates. He was taken into the ninth, 2 outs. And the Cardinals broadcast on Bally Sports, I believe it is, was like, if there's any guy on this field that you'd want to hit it to, it's Harrison Bader. Because that's how good he was defensively. And let me mind you, I believe Arenado and Goldschmidt were out there too. They're two very good defenders. But if you want to hit, you hit to Bader. Now, they did hit to Bader. It was over his head. He couldn't catch it. It was just a good hit. But, it just shows you that the Cardinals even saw the defense. Broadcast, they saw the defense. I remember that moment. So I do know what he brings to the table defensively. His bat's not that far off from Aaron Hicks. So you wonder if this could be something where the Yankees are look, Hicks is not hitting with a runner scoring position. He's such a hot, cold hitter. You can't trust him. He's streaky. You can't throw me. You can't tell me you're gonna trust Hicks out there in a big moment against Verlander in a World Series game, right? Or even a guy like I don't know, if you come up against the Rays and you have to face Shane McClanahan or somebody like that. And I know he bats from both sides and he gives you that flexibility. I get all that, but he's just not good. So Bader, I think, brings that to the table. So I'm going to read you some numbers here on Hicks and Bader. So Hicks this year has played 92 games. Batting average of 226, 6 home runs, 31 RBIs, OPS of 673, 48 walks, on base percentage of 349, and a slugging of 325. Now you look at Harrison Bader's numbers this year, and this is where I mean they're not far off. He's had 72 games played, batting average of 256, 5 home runs, 21 RBIs, OPS of 673, 63 hits, 13 walks, on base percentage of 303, and a slugging of 370. So not an incredibly high on base guy, not going to work a ton of walks. But when you look at the numbers, he has a better batting average than Aaron Hicks, he has more hits than Aaron Hicks, and he has a higher slugging percentage than Aaron Hicks. Now Hicks has more home runs, more RBIs, more walks, and a higher on base percentage. But when you look at the OPS, their OPS is exactly the same, both 673, which both are under 700, which isn't great. But Bader and Hicks are neither going to light it up. But when you look at the numbers, you wonder if this is something more deeper than just outfield help, or more deeper than just, he's in there every couple days just to help out Judge. This could very well be, look, Hicks is struggling. He's hot, cold. We don't trust him. Let's bring in a guy that, when on paper, is not far off. Like, Bader's a 2 home run game shy of having more home runs than Hicks. He's a weak tear. He's just a 2-week, hitting tear where he has more RBIs than Aaron Hicks. And he's played 20 less games than Aaron Hicks. So the numbers show you it's kind of an upgrade. Better defensively, and he's got some better offensive numbers. So, like I said, I feel bad a little bit for Monty because I know he's liked around that locker room. He's a homegrown guy. When you look at the move, it's almost like this is something where the Yankees are just like, all right, let's move on a little. Let's back off from Hicks a little bit. Let's bring in a guy that you can trust more come postseason time. And I think that's what this Bader deal does. So the Yankees got rid of Montgomery, bringing Harrison Bader, and it's funny, and I say this all the time. Trade deadline is so weird where I talked about it a couple days, yesterday, and I'll say it again today. Luis Castillo today in the day game, final game of the 3-game set, is going up against the Yankees. Yankees were in trade talks to bring in Castillo, and now he's going up against the Yankees as a Seattle Mariner. Christian Vasquez gets traded during batting practice. Juan Soto is going to, number one, he's going to play the Dodgers at the end of this week, a team that was looking at him. And number two, Soto's going to play the Nationals, is it next week, I think, or next week or 2 weeks, in D.C., so he's going to have a quick return there as a Padre. So it's just crazy how the deadline works. And now you look at the Montgomery. He's going to start most likely on Friday for the Cardinals. That's the first game of the 3-game set when the Yankees are in St. Louis. So we're going to get to see Monty right away in a Cardinals uniform. So it's just funny how things work out like that. But that was the deal. The Yankees made the big move. And obviously the other one was Gallo. And you get a minor league pitching prospect, the 15th ranked in the Dodgers organization. Clayton Beeter was his name. Maybe he turns into Clayton Kershaw. But he 15th ranked. I believe now he's the 10th ranked pitching prospect for the Yankees. So they get a prospect, get a young guy, AA. Strikes out a lot of guys. ERA's up. It's all about bringing that ERA down. He's a high strikeout pitcher. He's just ERA's up in the 6, so you got to bring that down if you want any chance of making it to the big leagues. But he's a AA pitcher, so you get something for him. And Gallo gets a fresh start. And I gotta admit, I was shocked by the Gallo to the Dodgers because I thought Gallo was going to go to some small market team. I mean, the Dodgers are not a small market. If you're struggling there, you're not going to hear the end of it either. So Gallo's going to have to really get going. And I do, the Gallo tenure just didn't work. And I hope he finds his stride a little bit against the Dodgers. I do. He's not a bad guy. He handled himself very professionally, answered all the questions, took all the blows, was good in the locker room, was a guy that never really showed any emotion, was a guy, through all those strikeouts, just went back to the dugout and got ready to go out there on the field. And I think that's one thing that Gallo always did. And, the tenure just didn't work. This past calendar year has been terrible. But he's handled himself the right way. He didn't, all the boos, he didn't go back at the fans. He took them, he wore them, took them on the chin, and you move on. And that's really the only thing the Yankees and Gallo can do. So, Gallo tenure's officially over. They trade him. And now for the Mets, they made some moves. Some, I don't want to say questionable moves, but not, I think, the moves that Met fans really, really wanted them to make. And there's a lot of Met fans today that are upset. There's a lot of Met fans today that believe Billy Epler did not do a very good job. Billy Epler and Steve Cohen did not do a very good job. I would stand on the side of they missed out. I mean, the Mets missed out on a couple of opportunities. And I think, when you really break down some of these trades, letting David Robertson go to a division opponent, it really hurts. He's in division now, has had a great season, a guy that you wanted, and now he's in division. And the Mets, and the Phillies didn't give up much. The Phillies did not give up much. The Mets, on the other hand, there was rumors that they would have to give up a lot. So you wonder if it's just, one of those things where even though no matter how high those prospects were for the Mets, maybe the Cubs just did not like those guys or didn't feel those guys fit. Not really positions and needs, whatever it is, it was weird because there was rumors out there that the Mets would have to give up a lot for David Robertson. And the Phillies only gave up, I think, like their 20th ranked prospect for David Robertson. So it just like, where is the, are the rumors true that the Mets had to give up that much? Or were the Mets not really completely sold on just getting Robertson in the first place? But David Robertson goes back to Philly, which he played there, I believe, 2 years ago. Struggled a little bit, but it's a different pitcher now. A guy that has found his rhythm, kind of looks like the young pitcher that he was, in his days with the Yankees, where he was a really solid reliever for a long time. But they do bring in Darren Ruff, and they get rid of J.D. Davis, and that's an upgrade there. The Mets made upgrades, I will tell you that. They upgrades. Travis Janikowski, they got rid of him. A couple, upgrades over him. He's on the Mariners now. He played last night, struck out looking. But when you look at the Mets, they bring in Vogelback, bring in Naquin, and they bring in Darren Ruff. Those are 3 upgrades. Are they massive upgrades? Not really. Is a Wilson Contreras a smarter upgrade? Yeah. Is going out for like a guy like a Soto? Yeah. Even going out for, just a middle of the line kind of player, I just question a little bit because Vogelback hasn't been bad. Tyler Naquin had 2 hits last night. Now you bring in Darren Ruff. Maybe these are small moves that are going to really find themselves in New York. That's definitely a possibility. But what I really questioned from the Mets yesterday, and I think a lot of Met fans would be on the same page with me, is that they didn't get much pitching. They did not get that lefty arm. They did not get that arm in the bullpen that they needed. And now you're stuck with the possibility of having Joely Rodriguez go out there in big games and going to have to get out. And Joely Rodriguez has been terrible. Like I said, Vogelback, Darren Ruff, Naquin are all upgrades over guys like Jankowski, J.D. Davis, who got traded in a Darren Ruff deal, and even a guy like a Dom Smith, who's been up and down, just not a good, he's just been a kind of a crazy year for him. They're all upgrades. But when you look at the pitching, they bring in Michael Givens, who's not bad. He's had a pretty solid year in 40 appearances, got an ERA below 3 from the Cubs. But, not a lefty reliever, not really, you wonder, is he good enough to get big outs? Like, there's things that you just question with the Mets and their trade deadline approach. Like, are 3 of these bats, yeah, they're upgrades over Dom Smith, Travis Jankowski, and J.D. Davis. But are they good enough to get you to that next level? They might be upgrades over 3 guys that got ran out of town. I mean, nobody wanted J.D. Davis on the Mets anymore. Travis Jankowski, although Buck Showalter wanted him, let's be honest here, he did not have a spot on that team. And Dom Smith's been all over the place, up and down, up and down. Even when he's up, not good, he's been terrible, right? That 2020 season was kind of a fluke last year, all that stuff. He's not a very good player. He's just not having a good year. So those are upgrades, but it doesn't take much to get upgrades over those guys. What you really have to wonder if you're a Met fan is, are these upgrades good enough to win a World Series? Can you trust Darren Ruff in big moments? Are you going to be able to trust Vogelbach in big moments? Because the Mets need another bat, and you can't sit here and say, oh, well, they're not going to be in the lineup. So then you're going to roll out with the same exact lineup that you said has holes in it, and you need, I just question a little bit what the Mets did. I like I said, Darren Ruff, getting rid of J.D. Davis was solid. I think it's good. He's been terrible. Met fans don't like him. I think it was time. That's smart. You get Darren Ruff, up there in age, but a guy who last 2 years has been very good. This season out of a little bit of a down year. But when you really look at it, you just wonder, is this good enough? Is this something to take the Mets? Is this good enough to get the Mets from where they're at now and completely take over the Braves? That's what I think you really have to ask you. Is their roster right now better? Because I'll tell you this, Braves definitely have the better lineup. Right now, Braves have the better lineup. If you brought in a guy like a Wilson Contreras, I would probably say, okay, maybe the Mets. Or Contreras and maybe add another bat, I'd say, all right, maybe the Mets do. But didn't bring in that guy. Mets still have a hole at catcher. Can you trust Tomas Nido and James McCann to be your catchers during the postseason? Still a lot of questions to be filled with this Mets roster. And you can't answer those now because it's too late. It's past the 6 p.m. Eastern deadline. But I did have a question what the Mets did. Like I said, they're definitely upgrades. But when you ask yourself, are they good enough? Are they truly going to get you over that hump? I just don't know if I could, as not a Met fan, just as a neutral viewer, I just don't know if I could say that when you look at the guys that they brought in. Now, Vogelbach's been pretty solid. Naquin had 2 hits, like I said earlier. Vogelbach's been a pretty pleasant surprise. Maybe he's a guy that they saw something in, and he turns into maybe a really solid asset. Naquin's interesting, and Darren Ruff. Now, Darren Ruff does give you a little bit of flexibility. Being an infielder and an outfielder can give you that little bit of flexibility. I think the big concern for the Mets is still the bullpen. I think they definitely made upgrades with hitting, but there's still questions there. But the big thing is the bullpen. Because the bullpen, you bring in Michael Givens, that's great, but your lefty arms in that bullpen, it's just interesting. That bullpen is still, you're going to have to bank on going into the postseason that Lugo is completely right. Because if he's right, that's big. He's a guy too, Ottavino, another guy. Those are a couple of those guys. When they're bad, they're really, really bad. And you don't bring in much, you don't bring in much protection into the bullpen, in the trade deadline. So you're really having to bank on some of those guys to just hope that they're dominant and hope that they're their usual selves. Because if not, that's when things can spiral out of control. But let me break down some of these trades. So the Mets get infielder, outfielder Darren Ruff, and the Giants get J.D. Davis, Thomas Sazapuki, Carson Seymour, Nick Zwak. And the Mets also got pitcher Michael Givens, and the Cubs got Saul Gonzalez. Carson Seymour is a right-handed pitcher. Zazapuki and Nick Zwak are both lefties. So Mets acquire a right-handed pitcher, and they acquire outfielder and infielder as well. And J.D. Davis goes in that deal. So I want to show you these stats from Darren Ruff. Because I want to tell you that, although there might be a lot of negative around the Mets, Darren Ruff, if he can find a way to unlock something, the past 2 years he's been very, very solid. So in this season, 2022, he's played 90 games. He's got a batting average of .216, 11 home runs, 38 RBIs. He's got an OPS of .701, 328 on base percentage, and a slugging of .373. He's worked 40 walks this year. Now, his 2021 stats, this is last year. He played 118 games. He had a batting average of .271, 16 homers, 43 RBIs, OPS of .904, on base percentage of .385, slugging .519, walks 46. Now, his last 2 seasons, 2021 and 2020, he played 40 games in 2020, and he played 118 last year. So take 2020 with a grain of salt if you want, whatever. He batted 271 in 2021, which was last year, and he batted 276 in 2020 in 40 games. So the batting average was a lot higher in 2020 and 2021. This year it's 216. His on-base percentage was 385 last year. This year it's 328. Now, to have a 216 batting average and a 328 on-base percentage is pretty solid. It means you're working walks. He's already worked 40 walks this year in 90 games. Last year in 118 games, he worked 46 walks. So it's almost like he's seeing the ball a little bit better this year with those walks. He's definitely going to find a way to walk 6 more times. So he'll probably have more walks. And when you look at the numbers, they're not complete, but he'll probably end up with more home runs this year. It's possible. Very well might end up with more RBIs this year. His OPS is probably going to be better than last year. On-base percentage will probably be better his OPS will probably be better last year. On-base percentage of slugging will probably be better. But, when you look at the home runs, all that stuff. But the big thing is when you look at the numbers, it's like he was a high average guy with an OPS of 904 last year. Do the Mets see something in him where they can turn him into? He's batting 216 with an OPS of 701. And that's not terrible. That's not bad. Especially when you have an on-base percentage of 328. It would be one thing if you're batting 216 and got an on-base percentage of 301. That would be a little bit concerning. But the fact that your on-base percentage is up there in the threes, it shows that he's working his walks. And like I said, he's probably going to end this year with a lot more walks than he did last season. I just think that when you look at the average and look at some of the OPS and stuff, and on base percentage, it's almost as if like this year he's fallen off a little bit in terms of hits and stuff. But the power's still there. He's probably going to end up with more homers. Probably going to end up with more RBIs. We'll see if he plays more games than last season. But Darren Ruff's definitely got something in him because the last 2 years have been really good. This year, certain categories, a little bit of a down year, but still getting on base. Not a huge home run guy, but he's got a little bit of power. He'll drive in some runs. He'll work his walks. Solid player. Not great. Not, this phenomenal player by any means, but a solid guy. He's not going to play every day. He hasn't really ever played every day. But a guy they bring in and is an upgrade over J.D. Davis. So the Mets made some upgrades. Are they phenomenal? I wouldn't say so. Are they what elevates the Mets team right now from where they're at to a World Series to a true World Series threat? I wouldn't say so. Especially when you see teams in the National League like the Padres making the moves they're making. And I know the Dodgers didn't make many moves, but let's be honest here. The Dodgers they're in a good spot. I know they brought in Joey Gallo, and who knows? I mean, if the Dodgers can unlock Joey Gallo, that's a big bat. I mean, people don't realize prior to his Yankee time, Joey Gallo was was a solid player. He was a 220 hitter that cranked in 35, 40 home runs a season. He just fell apart when he came here. And maybe a change of scenery helps, we'll see. So that concludes the trade deadline. Yankees, Mets both make moves. Like I said, I think, and this is, I know I'm a Yankee fan, and this might sound biased. I do think, personally, I don't think many Met fans would disagree with me. Yankees had a better trade deadline than the Mets, and I'm not trying to make this a competition, but just to try to put into perspective that the Mets missed out on a couple guys, and I definitely think that. I'm not denying, and I think this is where people might take me and take it the other way. I'm not denying that the Mets made upgrades. It's just, you don't know if these upgrades, and you could say the same thing about any team. But I would feel more confident bringing in guys like, Wilson Contreras to make those big impacts to win a World Series. These trades, they're good. I just don't know if they're enough to put you over the top. That's really what I got to say about it. So, Yankees, Mets trade deadline. Mets made some moves. It was funny because, and that's the big thing. I think that's what all Met fans should conclude. You made some moves. Met fans were panicking yesterday about like 3 o'clock when they weren't making any moves. And it was like 3 hours before the deadline, and their only 2 moves that they made was Vogelbach, and they brought in Tyler Naquin. And yesterday you were waiting, you're like, all right, let's make some moves. You see David Robertson go off the board. You're like, all right, things are you could definitely tell Mets fans were sweating it out a little bit. They did make some moves, but I don't think it was all the moves the Met fans exactly wanted to make. But look, the Yankees, I'll say, Yankees are the king of bringing in bargain guys that they don't expect to do much, turn them into something. I mean, look at Jose Trevino, had another home run last night. I mean, a guy the Yankees brought in because Ben Rortvedt got hurt. If Ben Rortvedt never got hurt, Jose Trevino is probably not a New York Yankee. You bring him in, he's an all-star, and he's absolutely tearing it up. 3 home runs in the past 2 games. So, very well could one of these moves be that guy where it becomes a dominant force? It's very possible. Sometimes teams see things in these guys and they turn into something. So, we'll see. I think the big thing with the Mets, though, is DeGrom came out of yesterday, started healthy, and I think if you're a Met fan, you should just be happy about that and hope that the roster that you have now can go do something, because you have weapons on that roster. It's just, you wonder if it's enough. So, we'll see how it all plays out. But now let's recap the rest of baseball, because a lot went down yesterday. And really over the past, couple days, deadline is yesterday, but a lot of moves take place prior and after it, or prior to it, and, a couple days before it and all that stuff. But you heard the big story was Juan Soto, obviously. But I do want to say this. I said this earlier in the show. All 30 teams made a move. 29 of the 30 teams, made moves. The only team that did not make a move yesterday was the Colorado Rockies. And the Rockies right now are 46-60, 25 and a half games out. So I think that tells you a lot about where they're at. They're in a spot where they don't want to give up a lot of their pieces. They don't want to sell. They don't want to buy. They're kind of just like, all right, we'll just stand pat. And I'm sure, like I mentioned earlier, the Rockies are a team that probably fielded calls and got calls on Daniel Bard, one of the relievers. I'm sure people were checking in on C.J. Cron to see what his availability was. So it's not like they were probably just sitting back and not getting anything. I'm sure they were in conversations. Now, they did say they were not planning on trading Daniel Bard, but at the end of the day, if the right deal comes across, you could trade it. You might trade that type of reliever. I know the Yankees, there was some rumors that the Yankees might be looking at him. You know how it is. It could just be, and that's how the trade deadline is sometimes. You could call up and say, all right, what would it take to get this guy? And they could say, prospects, this, that, and you can hang up, and that could be the end of it. Or you could just literally, and that's why I think people got to realize sometimes at the deadline, it's like when something comes across where it says the teams are talking, that can mean a whole bunch of things. That can mean literally the GM called up and say, is this guy available? And if they say yes, he's like, all right. And never call back, right? That could just be how it is, text messages, all that different stuff that these GMs, converse on. But anyway, so a lot went down yesterday. That's the bottom line of it all. We got to start with the Soto, because the Soto deal is obviously the biggest of them all. And I genuinely feel bad for National fans, because when you look at this team now, they completely tore it apart. Got rid of Juan Soto, got rid of Josh Bell. The only real piece that people thought might be moved was Nelson Cruz. He's still there. And Nelson Cruz, I think, didn't get moved because he's getting up there in age. He's not much of a big power hitter anymore. He's just a guy that really is he's not what he once was. And I think a lot of people can agree on that. I think a lot of teams, when they really looked at the market and said, all right, there's guys like Josh Bell, J.D. Martinez available. Now, they did not trade J.D. Martinez. The Red Sox didn't. They actually stood pat. Red Sox made some interesting moves. We'll get to that here in a second. But when you look at the Nationals, it's like, Nelson Cruz was the only guy that really didn't get traded. And the Nationals did win yesterday 5-1. But you got to feel bad for National fans, because what they've done to that team is completely tear it apart. They've gotten rid of Harper, got rid of Scherzer, Trey Turner, Zimmerman retired, Rendon gone, Soto now gone, Josh Bell now gone. It's like some of their better players over the past couple seasons, and I know this was only Josh Bell's second year, but Josh Bell's made a very big impact for the Washington Nationals. I know it hasn't resulted in many wins, but he was a guy that I think personally was an all-star snub. I think he very well should be an all-star, and I think he's a guy that a lot of people now probably will get more national recognition in San Diego. I think he's a guy that's gonna be a big impact in San Diego, and I think he's an upgrade over Eric Hosmer there. Eric Hosmer's not bad, but when you look at the contract and you look at the production, I think Josh Bell's better. He brings a lot more power. He's in the middle of a career season, and the Padres now look absolutely lethal. And the Nationals, and I'll always say this about this deal, unless if C.J. Abrams and a lot of those players turn into something special. You have never seen this. And Jeff Passan really talked about on ESPN yesterday when the news, just broke about, you've never really seen a guy 23 years old get traded with that much talent to another team, like, especially for a rebuilding team. You want to surround players around one main guy. Soto was that guy in DC. Now he's gone. Who are you, like, there's really no foundation anymore with the Nationals. Now they kind of got to reset and figure out which guy's going to be the face of the franchise. Nationals don't really have a face of the franchise right now. And that's a sad place to be as an organization. Because you need a face of the franchise. You need a guy to lean on. You need a guy to trust. You need a guy that's going to at least be a solid player for a very long time. A guy that you know is going to make your team at least a little bit competitive. Nationals don't have that now. And the San Diego Padres got a lot better. I mean, when you look at that Padres lineup now, Josh Bell, Soto, Tatis, Machado, Cronenworth, Josh Hader coming out of the bullpen, Yu Darvish starting. I mean, geez, that is a lineup that I don't think any team in all of baseball wants to match up with. So yesterday, the Dodgers got a lot better, Nationals got a lot worse, and now the Nationals kind of go down a path where they just have to hope one or two of these prospects turn into something special, because if they don't, this will be one of the biggest failed trades in history. Getting rid of a guy who came into the league as 19 years old, entering his prime, he's 23 years old, and yet you get rid of him. And some of it, who knows? Maybe Soto didn't want to be there. Maybe he wants to go win, and I don't blame him. I wouldn't want to be there right now. I don't blame him. I mean, for a team that's entering a rebuild right when he's entering his prime, I don't really blame Soto. But this is the beauty of the trade deadline. One team got a lot worse. One team got a lot better. Now you look at the Nationals lineup, and it's really, really bad. You're going to have to hope guys like C.J. Abrams turn into what they're expected to be. You're going to have to hope a guy like Elijah Green, who they just drafted, and he'll be up in a couple years, a guy like him. And you also don't want to rush the process on these guys either. You got to make sure to develop. That's the risk you take too, because sometimes these organizations, they're in a rebuild, they get all these prospects, they rush these prospects through the minors, bring them up, they're not ready, and it fails. That's why you got to be patient. So it's going to be a rough couple years in DC. They're going to be at the bottom of the MLB for the next couple years. They will be. Because these prospects are going to have to develop. They're going to have to come up in the farm system. Just automatically they're going to have to adjust. So it's going to be a rough couple years in DC. But I'll tell you what makes that team in San Diego scary is they're all young. Tatis is young. Soto's young. Josh Bell is not extremely young, but he's got a lot of gas left in the tank. Machado's a guy that's got a lot of gas left in the tank. He's not necessarily young, but he's got a lot left. But you look at that lineup with Tatis and Soto, that's going to be a 1-2 punch for the next 10, 15 years. And I think that's what's most scary about it. Not only is this move going to impact San Diego this season in their chase for a World Series, but it's going to help San Diego for many years to come. You've already got Tatis locked up. You already got Machado. Now your focus has got to be on locking up Soto. And I think that's the advantage that the San Diego Padres have, is that they brought in Soto, and they don't have to worry about Tatis' contract. They don't have to worry about a Machado contract. They already paid those guys. Those guys are paid. Josh Bell's under contract. I don't think they're going to give Josh Bell anything major. He's under contract. I don't know exactly the specifics of his deal, but he's there. I'm sure they'll extend him. He's not going to get major money. He's a very good player, but he's not going to be the highest paid player in all of baseball. Now you got to focus on, if Soto wants the money, give him his money, because you're able to. You don't have to worry about paying Tatis. That's the one thing that the Yankees had the issue with if they did bring in Soto. You would have to figure out whether or not who to pay. Do you pay Judge or Soto? Because you're most likely not going to be able to pay both. Now, there is that thought process. You could go all out for Aaron Judge, pay him the money, and have 3 years with Soto under his current deal, have 3 pennant races, and then when he becomes a free agent, you cross that bridge when you get there. You could have that, but a Padres team now has a lot of flexibility. They could give Soto his money now. I don't think, I'll stand by this. Unless if somebody comes out publicly about it, I don't think Soto is one of those guys that wants all the money. I think he wants to win, and I think that's ultimately why the Nationals got rid of him. I think that's, I wouldn't be surprised if Soto told the Nationals, look, if you aren't going to win, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be a part of the rebuild. I want to win. Especially for a guy that's 23, you don't want to waste his prime years of his career. I think that very well could have been the case. Maybe, he's not going to get much more money than what they gave him, no matter how good he is. You're asking for the largest contract in all of baseball. So you'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. But the bottom line is, take the money aspect out of it. Padres are a force to be reckoned with. They are dominant. So good. So good. And teams like the Braves, Dodgers line up pretty well against them. But that's my point with the Mets. I know the Mets might not have to face the Dodgers until like an NLC or Padres until like the NLCS if things line up the right way, and a lot can happen from the NLDS, from the division series to the wild card to the NLCS. A lot can happen, but that's what I'm talking about with the Mets. Are the Mets good enough to match up against a team like the Padres? And I know the Braves come into town, and I know the Mets beat the Braves, a couple weeks ago and took 2 out of 3. But when you look at the lineup, Braves have a better lineup than the Mets. And the Padres now do too. That's what I was trying to say with the Mets, is are they really good enough to get over their fellow National League teams? The Dodgers, the Padres, the Braves. They might have the pitching, the hitting's the big thing. Now that's what you really wonder. But the Padres, no need to worry about the hitting, because they got big bats, and they're all young, and that's the most scary thing. Braves, Padres, that's going to be 2 dominant teams for many, many years to come. So the Soto trade went down. You had David Robertson going to the Phillies. Noah Syndergaard went to the Phillies as well. Solid move for the Phillies. You bring in David Robertson. I don't really like the Syndergaard move. I don't think Syndergaard's very good. We'll see what he does in Philly. If he does well there. I personally didn't want Syndergaard in New York. I just don't think he can handle it here. I also just think the media would absolutely destroy him if he struggles, just because of the fact the way it ended with the Mets. Goes to L.A. or goes to the Angels in Los Angeles, in Anaheim, California. He goes there. Wasn't. He was all right. Wasn't great. Phillies add a little bit of They add something to your rotation. He's not awful. He's not the worst pitcher in baseball. I've never really liked Syndergaard. I've never really liked him. I've never been very high on him. But they bring him in. They bring in David Robertson, which is an excellent arm for a bullpen that needs it. And you get David Robertson, too. Already has some familiarity with the Phillies. Their organization was there a couple years ago. Struggled a little bit. Knows what it's like going to be playing in a big market. Comes back. He's much better this year than when he signed there. Rob Thompson, too, a guy that knows him from his time with the Yankees. So it's a right fit, and it's a bullpen that was in. It was a bullpen that needed another arm. We all know how bad the Phillies bullpen has been. I guess it's been a little better recently with Rob Thompson. Maybe the managing of it's been a little bit better, but the whole situation with that bullpen. Blowing games left and right. David Robertson's a much needed arm. So that's a solid move for the Phillies, and Phillies bolster their rotation a little bit too with Syndergaard. Although you know how I feel about him. You also had the Blue Jays getting Whit Merrifield, so they make a move, make a splash, second baseman there, a very good player, and the Royals sell off a little bit. They did not get rid of Greinke. Royals didn't make many moves. I believe Merrifield and Benintendi were their only 2. But Michael A. Taylor, a guy that was on the rumor mill, they already got rid of Carlos Santana earlier in the year, so I guess they got rid of a decent amount. They got rid of so Michael A. Taylor is still a Royal. He did not get traded. But they did get rid of Scott Barlow. I don't think got traded either. So a couple guys that were on the rumor mill from the Royals did not get traded. But the bottom line is Blue Jays get Whit Merrifield. And you add that to second base with Santiago Espinal is very good. Merrifield can play a couple different places. They were talking about it in the S Network broadcast, and I've said this for a long time, and I had him on my fantasy team last year, and I have him on my fantasy team again this year. Whit Merrifield is a very, very good player. He's a very underrated player. Just got 1,000 hits over the weekend when the Royals were in town for the 4-game set against the Yankees. He's a very good player. He's been a very solid player for the Royals for many years and very underrated. And I think a part of it's because he's been on the Royals, and I think that's part of it. It's a small team, and I believe, if I remember correctly, I don't know if he was on that. Let me check. I don't know if Whit Merrifield. He was not on that. No, he was not on that Royals team that won the World Series. So he's been on some pretty bad Royals teams. And I think that's the big thing. Is like he's been on some pretty bad Royals teams. He's one of the most. I've always said it, and I said it last year too. He's always been one of the most underrated players in all of baseball. So a nice pickup for the Blue Jays there is they look to try to gain some ground on the Yankees. And I think at this point too, they're just trying to secure a wild card spot. They're currently 4 games up. By the way, the Orioles are 1.5 games out of a wild card. 2-game win streak, 6-4 in their last 10. 1.5 games out of a wild card spot. So the Blue Jays, or not the Blue Jays, Orioles, who got rid of their reliever Jorge Lopez. So they did bring in a couple nice arms, but Orioles got sold a little bit. But they are, they're still young and rebuilding, and who knows? Maybe they make it into a wild card spot. Red Sox got Eric Hosmer. Red Sox, very weird deadline. Held on to JD Martinez. Held on to Bogarts. I know some people thought that Devers might get moved. I did not see that. I did not expect that at all. He got held on to. No surprise there. I was a little bit surprised to see JD Martinez get held on to just because of the fact that you would think a team like the Mets or a team looking for a bat would be very aggressive for him, especially because Josh Bell went off the board. He was, Wilson Contreras stayed. You would think he was one of the big bats. And like I said, like a guy like a Nelson Cruz, Mancini was already off the board. Josh Bell went off the board. You knew that the Rockies weren't really willing to deal anybody like that. CJ Cron. So teams like the Mets, you really thought that JD Martinez would kind of be like the sole focus for a lot of these teams. Obviously, that wasn't the case. He stays. Red Sox did an interesting retooling. They got rid of Christian Vasquez, brought in Reese McGuire. Now you bring in Eric Hosmer. You keep JD Martinez, Bogarts, Dever, bring in Tommy Pham. So an interesting retooling of their roster. And right now they stand 2 games out of a wild card spot. So they're a team right now that, is 2 games out. And look, although they're struggling, they're a team just like the Orioles or any of those teams. They win 8 of their next 10, boom, they're right into a wild card. So I think that's probably the thought process behind the Red Sox deadline. Retool a little bit and see where it gets you. So Royals sold off a little bit. Blue Jays, we all know the Soto stuff. Mancini to the Astros, like I mentioned. Padres also got Brandon Drury, another guy they brought in. Cardinals, obviously, like I said, Brandon Monty. Just going down the list. Dodgers bringing in Joey Gallo. Giants held on to Rodon and Peterson and all that stuff. Pablo Lopez was a pretty popular name. He was a guy that supposedly started, the interest on him started to heat up a little bit towards the end of the deadline. A deal could not get done. But a guy that definitely keep your eye on to, in the offseason as a possibility of. I don't know if he's a free agent at the end of this year, but a guy that definitely drawed some interest. And the Marlins kind of stayed put too. Marlins were a team that were rumored to make, they said everybody's available except Sandy Alcantara. I don't know exactly what moves they made, but they definitely made a couple moves because they were one of the 29 teams to make a move. So it was active yesterday. An active deadline for sure. Then you get the extensions of Joe Musgrove and Austin Riley, and you look at teams like the Braves and all that stuff, and Nationals completely tearing it all up. Nationals got a win, and it was funny because there was a guy, and it was a pretty cool moment. Guy, first year, he spent 10 years in the minors. First game in the MLB, hits a home run. So, Nationals, last night, it had to be weird as a National fan watching that game. Because the guy that has manned right field for the entire season, he's played some left field as well, not this year, but 2020, I believe, and when Adam Eaton was there. A guy that's been in that outfield basically every day, been in the lineup pretty much every day, face of your franchise. When he wasn't there yesterday, that had to be weird to see that around the ballpark. And I truly believe there was a little bit of an extra buzz around the park yesterday in Nationals because I think there was a lot of Met fans there that wanted to see DeGrom and stuff. But it had to be weird, even for just the locker room in general. Soto has been such a crucial piece for that organization. To see him get traded, it was weird. And I'm not even a Nationals fan. It just felt weird, seeing like the highlights of the because I'm obviously watching the Yankees game, but I always see what's going on with the Mets game because, for my pods and stuff, I got to know what's going on with the Mets and New York sports and stuff. So, I also, just keep an eye on them. So I always keep an eye, check every couple innings to see on my phone, all my apps I got, I always check in to see, I also just do that in general for all the games across baseball, just checking to see what the scores are. And when you see the game like that and you see they're winning, you're like, wow, that's pretty shocking. I would have guaranteed, I would have placed money on it that Jacob deGrom coming back, Mets, high energy, the better team, and you have the Nationals without Juan Soto and Josh Bell. I'm sure a lot of people lost a lot of money last night on that game betting on the Mets to win. They took the 5-1 loss, but it's got to be weird. And like I said, Nationals are a team that's completely retooling. It's just my thing with the whole deal is, and I can't stress this enough, is everybody's like, oh, they got prospects. Well, are they any of those prospects going to be anywhere close to what Juan Soto? I don't think people realize how much talent Juan Soto has. He's already won a World Series for them. Are those prospects going to win World Series? Are they going to be that dominant as Juan Soto that young? You just don't. It's just really one of those things where it's just up in the air. I mean, it really is. And we've seen deals that, I think the only way the Padres are going to win this deal. Soto's so good. The only way that this, if this deal does not work out for the Nationals, like I said, they're going to be in a rebuild for a very long time. Because if these prospects don't turn out to what they expect them to be, they're going to struggle for a long time. And I think that's the big risk you take. But they took the risk, and Soto gets moved. That was obviously the big headliner. So, other than that, that's kind of what took place yesterday for the trade deadline. And I always say it. Look at the current standings. Look at your team's current roster. That's what you got. Unlike past years, there's no waiver and any of that. It's officially done. Pack it up. These are your rosters. And, if you're a team that just sold off everybody, well, try to find a way to enjoy the rest of the season, I guess, if you find your ways losing. Believe me, I know that feeling. My other sports teams sell a lot at the deadline. And we'll see if, sometimes you see those teams after the deadline make those big jumps when they acquire new talent. You also sometimes see those teams that retool a little bit, like a Red Sox team, and they bring in a little bit of a couple new faces here and there. Don't completely strip down, don't completely buy, retool a little bit, and you see what they do. So that's your finalized rosters, and now for the Yankees, the chase for 28 is not officially on because it was on since opening day, but now the chase for 28, this is the roster that hopefully is going to bring another World Series title, and the National League just got a whole lot more interesting with Soto going to San Diego. So that's what I got for the MLB trade deadline and the recap. Now let's get to the games here today on this Wednesday. All right, so you got Rays, Blue Jays today, Braves, Phillies, Diamondbacks, Guardians, Tigers, Twins, Rangers, Orioles, Astros, Red Sox, White Sox, Royals, Marlins, Reds, Pirates, Brewers, Cardinals, Cubs, Angels, A's, Rockies, Padres, and Dodgers, Giants. Mets, Nationals today, 4:05 p.m. Eastern, MLB Network and SNY. Mets come into today's game 65-38. Nationals come into tonight's game 36-69. Mets got Chris Bassett on the mound. He's 7-7 with a 3.84 ERA. Nationals have Anibal Sanchez on the mound. He's 0-3 with a 7.47 ERA. Over/under set at 9. So that game will be today. Yankees Mariners today as well. Matinee game in the Bronx, 1:05 Eastern, MLB Network. You'd also find it on Yes. Mariners are rolling out Luis Castillo, his first start as a Seattle Mariner. He's 4-4 with a 2.86 ERA. And the Yankees got Garrett Cole on the mound. He's 9-3 with a 3.30 ERA. Over/under set at 7. Like I said, Yankees 70-35, Mariners 56-49. So very good pitching matchup today. Luis Castillo, Garrett Cole, should be a lot of fun. Looking forward to it before the Yankees head out on the road. Yankees have an interesting road trip. So they go halfway to the did the Yankees release the lineup? Let's see. Yankees may have released the lineup. We're about 2 hours out from the game, so they very well could have released the lineup. Let's see. All right, so they have released a lineup. Judge is not in the lineup today. He gets a day off. That's why I checked, because he had the little explanation point next to him in fantasy baseball, so he's not in the lineup today. Lineup today is Rizzo leading off. Interesting. Rizzo leading off, Deej batting second, Carpenter batting third, Donaldson batting fourth, Benintendi batting fifth, Torres batting sixth, Hicks batting seventh, Falefa batting eighth, and Higgy batting ninth, and Cole's on the mound. Interesting lineup. Interesting that he put Rizzo in the one hole. I actually understand why. I know why he did it. Lefty, righty, lefty, righty, lefty, righty, switch hitter, and Hicks, who will be batting from the left side because Castillo is a righty, I believe. Then it's Connor, Falefa, Higgy. Okay, so I know why he did that. All right. Makes sense from Boone there. Lefty, righty, lefty, righty. Okay, I get that. I will tell you this. I don't want to be critical. I'm not a big fan of Benintendi behind Donaldson. I know Donaldson last night, what did he have? A double, I think, and a home run, so hopefully that unlocks him a little bit because he's been slumping. But I'm not a big fan of Benintendi batting behind Donaldson. And I know Benintendi's off to a little bit of a rough start. I get that. But you want Benintendi to get on with runners on. If there's 2 outs and Donaldson comes up, it's not great. It's not a great, and he's not a guy that's going to work high walks. He doesn't get on a crazy amount. So I don't know. I just don't know how I feel about that. But I shouldn't complain too much. Yankees have 70 wins. But that's your Yankee lineup. Rizzo playing first, Deej third, Carpenter right, Donaldson DHing, Benintendi, call him Benny. So Benny's in left, Torres is at second, Hicks is in center, Fleff is short, Higgy catching, and obviously Cole on the bump. So that's your Yankee lineup. Now let's go to fantasy baseball. So in my main league, I'm currently losing 86-69, and I've got Chris Bassett on the mound today. So I've got to make a move here. Got to take Judge out, put Torres in here, and call it a day. All right. So, by the way, I actually made a trade. So somebody offered me this trade, and I want you to comment in the comment section down below what you think of this trade. So somebody offered me this trade in fantasy baseball. It was I trade my opponent. I trade the guy Christian Vasquez, and I get William Contreras and Wander Franco. Now Franco's on the IL, so I don't know so much how I feel about that move because he just got surgery. He's going to be on the IL for a little bit. So I came back and gave him a move where I give him Christian Vasquez and Willie Adames. I get Bogarts and William Contreras. Now you might think that's unfair because of Bogarts, but when you really look at the deal, I'm kind of downgrading a catcher, but I feel as if I have JT Realmuto as my number one. So I don't need an insane backup. Vasquez, I could trade him and get something for him. So, and then I'm getting a better shortstop. So he's getting a better catcher, which is a need. I'm still giving him Willie Adames, who's a solid shortstop, and I get Bogarts as well. So we'll see if that move goes anywhere. And in my other league, I'm currently winning 60-15. And no pitchers today. Like I said, in my main league, I've got Bassett on the mound, so he will pitch the finale of that 3-game set in D.C. against the Nationals. So, and it's important, like I said, it's important for the Mets today to get a win because you don't want to go into that Brave series on 2 straight losses against the Nationals, a team that you should be beating up on. So it's pretty important for the Mets today to get a win, go into that National series with back-to-back series win, one being a sweep in Miami. And it's a big 5-game set at Citi Field over the weekend, Thursday through Sunday with a doubleheader on Saturday. So a lot of baseball coming up. Enjoy the games today. Matinee baseball, Yankees, and then Mets right after that. So it should be a full day of baseball. As always, I will see you all back here tomorrow. Hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.